Hello, and welcome to the Beautiful Business Podcast, where today we have our very first special episode for 2025. Today, I'll be hosting a pre-BenchPress panel with some incredible guests. I'm joined by Daniel Arhin from the Wow Company. Dan is a lead advisor for Wow and has been with the company for over 10 years. He's passionate about offering tailored support to his clients to help them achieve their personal and business goals. Next up, we have positioning and business development advisor and big friend of Wow, Ben Potter. Ben works with creative and digital agencies, helping them to evolve strategically, whether that's specializing, building pipeline, or work on sales. And lastly, another face you'll recognise, our very own co-host, Paul Bullpit. Paul will be dipping in as a panel guest today instead of a host, and I'm so excited to talk to Ben, Paul, and Dan as we get a rundown of 2024 and some predictions for the year ahead. Welcome to the Beautiful Business Podcast from the Wow Company. If you're searching for the right strategies, tools, and connections to ignite your thinking and elevate your business, then join us for a fortnightly dose of inspiration. Our guests range from industry-leading agencies and cutting-edge tech pioneers to motivational speakers and executives, all offering actionable insights to help you thrive in profit and purpose. So, whether you're a growing consultancy or an agency leader, this podcast is your source of knowledge and encouragement to spark meaningful change in your business and beyond. Gents, welcome to the episode. Very excited to have you all here. Obviously, we're already familiar with you, Paul, so I'm actually going to ask Ben and Dan, our guest panelists today, to just give us a little bit of intro and a little bit of stuff about you. Should we start with you, Ben? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Chloe. So I spent 13, 14 years working in digital agencies, mainly down in sunny Brighton. And for the last 7 or 8 years now, I've been advising agencies on positioning, on business development, and on sales. So I tend to work with sort of smallish, medium-sized agencies up to around about sort of 25 people to help them kind of, I suppose, professionalize their new business function and ultimately help them win the right clients. That's what it's all about.
Exciting stuff. Thanks, Ben. And Dan.
Hi, I'm Dan, account director at Wow. I've been at Wow for over a decade now, so one of the old timers. As you can probably see with the bit of the grey beard going on there. I manage a portfolio of agencies at Wow, and effectively my job is quite a nice job really. I get to talk to agency owners day in, day out, understand what their dreams and goals are, and then my job is to help them in the little way that I can on that journey in achieving those goals and dreams, and also support the leadership team at Wow as well.
Incredible. Thanks, guys. It's lovely to have you on, as I say, and of course you as well, Paul. But I am really excited to be talking about BenchPress today. It's the launch of the 2025 survey, and it feels appropriate to just do a bit of reflecting on 2024. One of the first things that we talked about in the BenchPress 2024 initial State of the Agency Nation report was how agency leaders and owners were kind of feeling about the year ahead, their confidence marker. And I think it came up at 69 out of 100. So people were kind of cautiously optimistic entering 2024. And I'm keen to know, what do we think? What were our thoughts on 2024 now that we've completed it? Dan, let's come to you first.
Yeah, so I guess agency owners are very, very optimistic generally, which is good, because that 69 did come off the back of a very, very challenging year for agencies. Revenue growth was difficult to come by, and profitability was down as well. Going into 2024, I think the reality is that it was a continuation of that difficulty in terms of revenue growth and profitability. There have been issues. Unfortunately, off the back of that, there also have been kind of liquidations in the space as well. And also, a bit of an unprecedented year in terms of the number of elections around the world, and I think that has also caused issues with some of your larger global brands, maybe kind of pausing decisions, reducing budgets, only kind of looking at short-term projects whilst all of that kind of plays through. On the more positive side, one of the things that I've heard throughout 2024 is that from a recruitment perspective, it's actually one of the best years that people can remember in terms of the quality of talent available. We're starting to see a little bit more kind of AI experimentation as well, which I think will prove to have kind of more medium to long term benefits.
Do we think that we were right to have that confidence coming into 2024 then? Is there I've heard when I've been speaking to agency owners that there's been well, it's been an up and down year, as I guess is agency life, right? It is up and down. But I mean, do we think overall that that cautious optimism was the right attitude to have?
I'm not sure. uh, There'll be loads of people looking at this saying, "What an epic year! That was like the best year ever." But I think some of the thing with confidence is it's by its very definition, it's emotional, isn't it? And I think what we've seen is confidence and lack of confidence can both be contagious. We can be guilty of like talking ourselves into a situation, but actually, if you're there and the client that you're pitching to is sitting on their hands and they're not quite sure about making a decision, and like Dan said, until after the election, or we're not quite sure, and then that then feeds onto their suppliers and their people and their recruiting and so on and so forth. So you wouldn't advise someone, with the benefit of hindsight, you wouldn't advise someone to go into 2024 without any confidence, without any. But I think maybe cautious optimism's like quite a good, like pragmatic way to view the world. Whatever, whatever happens in 2025, we'll still be sat here at the end of this year, probably doing a review of 2025 podcast, and like who knows, I suppose.
I think what you said about the kind of optimism or lack of being infectious, wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think, however difficult times are, I think it's important for business leaders to be optimistic, to kind of see, where the opportunities are, and okay, we are in this difficult situation, but how can we get ourselves out of it? And I think that then filters down through the teams. Then the teams can also have that optimism as they go about their daily jobs. So I think optimism is important at all times, and then we just need to make sure that we're mitigating risks on the downside along the way.
I think from a new business point of view, I think the overarching theme, if you like, for 2024 has been indecision, dither, delay, things going on hold, things you think are going to happen, all of a sudden don't happen, contracts even going out to clients that then don't come back. And I think that's been born out of a lot of what Dan referred to earlier on. There's been a lot of macro issues that are, of course, outside of our direct control, but which do end up having a direct effect on our businesses. So there's been a lot of that going on. So I thought it was quite a difficult start. It's been a bit of a mixed middle, but I think there are green shoots actually. And I mean, this is an anecdotal barometer, but I kind of look at things in terms of my own business. How many conversations am I having? Am I winning work with agencies? Because I think if they're doing okay and they've got additional money to spend on outside advice and suppliers, etc., then that's probably quite a good barometer of how things are generally. And I've definitely found since September, things have got busier, thankfully, because it was a very quiet summer. But things have got a little bit busier. So that kind of says to me, maybe things are picking up a little bit. Agencies do have a bit more confidence to invest in outside support and help. I don't think we're out of the woods yet by any stretch, but it does feel as if things are starting to turn. There's a bit more certainty. Certainly, the UK economy. Hopefully, we've now got a new government. We haven't got an election on the horizon, so hopefully, we're starting to look at things with a little bit more certainty and confidence going into 2025.
Yeah, let's hope so. I'm looking forward to seeing those scores actually when we release the data. So going into 2025 then and thinking of this from, I mean, we're asking some more kind of culture people-based kind of questions. We're actually doing a breakdown of salaries for the first time as well, a bit more around kind of remote hybrid work and recruitment. Dan, I know you alluded to it there, that actually recruitment's been a more successful part of 2024. I'm keen to think about how the economic and the social effects from the past few years, not just 2022, 2024, but previous years to that as well. How is that come to fruition in 2024, and what edits do we need to make in 2025, specifically in those areas? Paul, what do you think about that?
That's quite the question.
Sorry, it's a lot, isn't it? That was loaded.
I think it was interesting listening to what Ben had to say about the uptick in his business since September. I think when we see these periods of like indecision or lack of confidence, unless there's like a fundamental economic underpinning of it, you can't sit on your hands forever. And I think, kind of going back to like the cautious optimism, I think like we all need to be open to like new business, new opportunities. Certainly if you're running an agency or a business that's had a bit of a tough time for a period, that you just end up in this like siege mentality, and everything that comes at you looks like a threat, and you're turned off to opportunities. I think at some point you need to carry on like the siege analogy. You need to get yourself out of the trenches, get your tin hat off, and like look out for opportunities a bit more.
Talk to me about recruitment then, Dan. What is it what's implied that it's been the best ever? Why is it the best ever?
So from talking to a lot of business leaders, I guess some of the underlying reasons for this aren't overly positive, in that there have been some agencies going under and some really, really good talent effectively becoming available. So agencies who, as Paul has said, are looking forward and are looking for opportunities and are looking at growing, have found that when they are looking to bolster their teams to move forward, the quality of talent at their disposal in terms of in the interview process is unbelievably high, and they're actually finding it really, really difficult to choose. Whereby if we rewind probably 3 or so years ago, recruitment was one of the biggest challenges kind of around the pandemic, one of the biggest challenges that agency owners were facing due to the pandemic. A lot of businesses were having to undergo digital transformation projects, which was kind of sucking up a lot of talent, and that talent was being paid very handsomely. So agencies were struggling on that side of things, and we're definitely over that now. And numerous agencies, has said that the talent that they've brought into their teams have been exceptional and making significant impact in those businesses.
Ben, I'm really intrigued. One of the hot topics, I guess, of this year has been, unsurprisingly, I guess, new business. And I'm always so fascinated by how people adapt to tough times when it comes to that stuff. And one of the most consistent things I've heard is how people have had to kind of take a deep look at their offerings and their services and start to kind of consider their position with this stuff. Since that's your area, I'm really keen to know what you've kind of noticed this year, what your thoughts are, and especially when it comes to that scary feeling of having to niche or position yourself very specifically
Right.
when actually times are quite tough.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever seen anything I've written on LinkedIn or spoken to me, you will know I'm a big advocate of niching, specialization, narrowing your focus, whatever you want to call it. Whilst there are some agencies that can kind of almost get away with that kind of lack of strategy, and I think this is something we really need to kind of keep in mind, that we use this word positioning in agency land, but what we really mean is your business strategy. I don't think those two things are particularly different. In fact, I think they're one of the same. And I do think there is, unfortunately, a distinct lack of strategic nous, actually, in how agencies run their businesses and how they make those difficult decisions around what they do, who they do it for, and how they do it. Which is slightly ironic because a lot of those agencies will offer strategic services and advice to their clients. So there's something not quite working here. But I think, yes, first and foremost, I think if you are an agency of 10, 15, 20 people and you are still basically saying, we do everything for everyone, your card is marked. You are not going to, okay, you might make it through the next few years, but if you're thinking about things such as those key metrics that appear in BenchPress, like, profitability, for example, I think you're going to find it really, really difficult to meet the mark when it comes to what we would consider to be an acceptable or decent level of margin if you are continuing to try and be everything to everyone. In the first few years, yes, absolutely, because you're experimenting, you're working with different types of clients, doing different types of things for them. But I think there comes a point in the evolution of an agency where you have to say, right, we are not going to get to the next run of the growth ladder unless we start to become known for something quite specific. And there are still, in my view, far too many agencies out there that are kind of trying to hedge their bets by essentially offering a myriad of digital services. You've got that massive drop-down menu on the website with 50 different services listed. And then you look at the team and they've got 10 people and you're like, hold on, how does that work? How can you be an expert across all these services? And then they've got all these kind of heavily SEO optimized industry landing pages where, again, they're claiming to be experts. We've got to move away from this idea of hedging, and I think start to become more specialized as an industry generally. That is the foundation to growth. It's the foundation to everything I'm sure we're going to talk about today. Different pricing models, better profitability, all of that stuff. It all goes back to your business strategy, and we've got to get better at that because it's a universal failing across probably 80-90% of agencies who unfortunately just aren't well positioned in the market.
In terms of that issue with positioning, I think from conversations I've had with full service agencies, the perceived issue that they see is a reduction in opportunities. And that's where they see, well, actually being full service, selling everything to everything, actually that increases my opportunities, and therefore that makes me a better agency moving forward. But as kind of BenchPress shows year in, year out, it is the niche agencies that outperform the generalist agencies. There are a number of reasons for that in terms of having a very, very clear ideal client avatar that you're going after, that all of your marketing efforts are focused on. It's the core competencies that you build within your agency as well to then serve that niche. It's the understanding of clients in that niche, the problems that they have, and your ability to solve those problems. Many, many, many reasons, but ultimately, those niche agencies find that they have a much better quality of opportunity when it comes to new business than your full service agencies.
Out of interest, Dan, when you have those conversations, because I know when I have these kind of conversations with agencies around the need to sort of niche or narrow, what when we talk about niching, is there a fear or misunderstanding of what that actually means? Because I kind of use niching, ironically, in the broadest possible sense, in that it doesn't just mean a sector. And I think often people think, okay, well, if I niche, that means I've got to choose one sector. And for some, that may feel quite limiting. But actually, if we're talking about niching, there are different ways of kind of splicing and dicing the audience for our services, beyond just choosing a sector. But what's the feedback you get? Do people kind of default into thinking, oh, well, that means I need to be a banking specialist? Well, that's going to be really limiting.
Yeah, absolutely. They do find or feel that it will be limiting, and using that specific example of, oh, that means I'm going to be a banking specialist. Then it's a case of, not only am I losing opportunities elsewhere, but actually my team might not be like engaged and enthused about kind of working in that sector. So it's about kind of opening their eyes in terms of the opportunities that being a niche agency provides. And once an agency is famous within a niche, the holy grail, like, those agencies are literally picking and choosing their clients and operating at extremely high margins.
So I'm sure that niching will be one of the answers to this question, but let's try and think outside of that a little bit. What have we noticed, the agencies that have thrived throughout 2024, what have we noticed they're doing that's different to those that are barely surviving / not surviving at all?
I think some of it is simply around doing some of the basics, to be honest. Um, so, for example, are you genuinely a customer obsessed agency? Like, genuinely, in terms of fundamentally, the culture within the agency is everyone customer obsessed, thinking about their clients on a daily basis, the problems that their clients have, and really, really focusing on those opportunities because those businesses, and you can feel it in like the culture when you're talking to those agencies, they tend to have reduced churn of clients. They tend to have more opportunities because they're close to their clients and spend more time understanding those clients, and they also foster long-term relationships as well, which often sees them through thick and thin on that side of things. So having a culture of being customer obsessed, that's definitely a differentiator that I see.
Yeah, I'd kind of I think leaning back into the previous point, absolutely, narrow positioning. I think again, it's the foundation, it's fundamental. So certainly the agencies that I have been working with or have spoken to, the ones that tend to have done better this year tend to be specialists. I don't think that's too much of a surprise. Consistency, I bang on about this all the time, but I think consistent execution is absolutely critical. And when it comes to the sort of the marketing and business development piece, the one thing that narrow positioning does give you is clarity. Because instead of trying to build a marketing plan that targets everyone, you are building a marketing plan which is targeting a specific segment of the market. So it makes the decision making about what you do and what you don't do a great deal easier. And then with that comes greater consistency in kind of execution. I wrote a post a little while ago about the enemy of consistency being impatience. And I think what agencies are starting to, I hope, realize is that you have to give things a little bit of time, and particularly in new business. I see this all the time. We hire a BDM, they don't deliver any sales after 3 months and we fire them. We bring in a lead gen agency, they don't provide any meetings or any closed business in 6 months, we fire them. We run an event, it doesn't deliver any leads immediately. Oh, well, we won't do that again. So I think there needs to be a greater patience. If you are confident you are doing the right things, you need to carry on doing those right things on a more consistent basis and be patient and not worry too much about attribution as well. It's really, really difficult to say we ran that event and it directly led to us winning that particular client. Sometimes it's quite black and white. Sometimes it's not. Think about the broader picture instead with regards to that activity. And I think the final thing, and I spoke about this at an event a few months ago, Chloe, you might remember on the panel, is kind of mindset. I'm trying to push my clients to have a little bit more of a let's not take this whole thing too seriously kind of mindset. At the end of the day, however we dress it up, we do advertising, we do marketing. It's not open heart surgery. Have a bit more of a mindset where we're not taking this whole industry of ours too seriously because it should be fun, it should be enjoyable. And I'm trying to kind of drill that mindset in both into myself, but also into my clients as well to kind of roll with the punches. Things will generally be all right, and they normally are. So yeah, getting into that kind of mindset as well, I think is quite key.
What you said there, Ben, around being patient, bringing in a lead gen agency and it's not worked after 3 months, putting on events for 3 months, it's not working. Like, let's cut that. What's the new strategy? I think that's really, really important point. I've had many conversations this year with clients that have used lead gen agencies, and 9 times out of 10, they'll invariably give up after 3 months, 6 months. Hasn't led to anything. Um, I've had conversations where people have stuck at it and it's taken 12 months, but then in that 12 to 18 month period, they've had unbelievable results from it and then continue to do so. But it's going through that initial kind of 12 months in that lead gen agency, fully understanding what they do, their unique positioning and how they can help. And so I think, having that patience is really important. There was a internal comms agency I used to work with. They came to us about 1 million turnover. And one of the strategies for growth was putting on events, their own events, quarterly events. After a year, hadn't really brought in much and considering scrapping that and changing strategy. At the end of the meeting, we decided to continue for another 6 months, another two events. Once we'd done that and got to 18 months, at that point, they had the right people and decision makers in the room, in their events. And then that was the key strategy that took them from 1 million revenue to 4 million revenue and an exit based off of that. But if they didn't have that persistence and that patience, then who knows what would have happened.
Just dropping back onto your mindset point as well, Ben. Do you think that's what we're seeing collectively then? Like we talked earlier about it being contagious and stuff. Do we think that we're seeing maybe people taking it a bit too seriously?
Sometimes. I think you only have to kind of drill through your LinkedIn feed to look at things that people share and talk about to kind of realize that, yeah, sometimes I think we do take this whole industry of ours a little bit too seriously. As I said earlier, I don't mean this in any way to kind of devalue what we do as an industry and the value we bring to our clients. But if we really break it down, fundamentally, we help businesses sell more stuff. That's kind of it. And depending on your view of the world, particularly environmentally, you could say, well, that could be a good thing or possibly a bad thing. But I do think sometimes when I look at some of the stuff people talk about and so on, I do think collectively we could maybe just chill out a bit more and realize that what we do maybe isn't as important as sometimes we like to think it is. Be a little bit more humble, have a bit more humility. I certainly do. I mean, I know I made the joke to people that, God, if I'm looking at that from an agency point of view, I help agencies sell more to their clients so they can sell more stuff. So if anybody's got a sort of a bullshit job, mind the French, then it's definitely me. So yeah, I kind of try and look at the world in that way. But it's easy for me to say that I don't work day to day in an agency anymore. I haven't done so for 7 or 8 years, and I certainly look back on myself in my agency days, and yeah, goddamn, did I take things too seriously at times? Absolutely. So I caveat all of that by saying it's very easy for me to step out of an agency, observe, and have that point of view. But I generally think yes, we could maybe just not take ourselves quite as seriously as maybe we do sometimes.
Has anyone got any kind of practical advice for anyone listening that might resonate with that and think, yeah, I probably am taking it too seriously, but I don't really know how to stop doing that right now? Any advice for anyone?
So Chloe, I'm fascinated by this conversation. I'm absolutely not the person that should I'm not qualified. In fact, I'm someone that could benefit from this advice, I'm sure. So if you were, let me put the question back on you, Chloe. If you were coaching me or coaching someone who may be taking themselves or their work a bit too seriously, how would you go about coaching them out of it?
I guess I would ask someone to think about what they really enjoy, what got them into it in the first place. Do a bit of kind of digging into what it was they wanted to get from it when they first started, and it was a bit of a passion project, right? And then figure out along the way where things might have diverted off into different avenues that have made it feel a bit more serious. So like when we start off any passion project or anything, right? When you start a business, you're doing it because of sheer, I love this, I want to do this, right? That's, I think most of the time, that's what we see.
Well, no, I started well because I wanted to drive a Ferrari and fly private jets. But anyway, whatever.
Well, hey, if that's your passion.
Just for anyone listening, I don't fly or want to fly private jets. I think that reconnecting with your passion, reconnecting with your why, and certainly like organization wide, actually getting the rest of your team connecting with that purpose can be quite liberating. Sorry to have put you on the spot, but I think that's really good.
No, I
Really good
think it's
advice.
true, right? It's a fair point that sometimes life gets in the way, doesn't it? And by life, I mean all of the boring parts or the horrible parts that we don't like so much. All of the pressures can really step in, can't they? So yeah, reconnecting with the passion.
And I think just remembering that, this is, we're talking about owner managed businesses at the end of the day. So this is your business. So structure it in a way that you want it to be structured in terms of thinking about what you enjoy, why you started it in the first place. When I talk to a new client in our first kind of kickoff meeting, we always talk about what inspired you to kind of embark on this journey and start this agency. What gets you out of bed in the morning, those kind of things. And for them to remember that, because sometimes it might have been many, many years since they've actually kind of had that kind of reflection on why is it that we even started this thing, and then to reconnect to that, and then to make sure that the foundations of them, what's built to move forward, is aligned to that, I think is really important.
Yeah, I think the other thing to just remember is that most agency owners are or were practitioners. So they started off as designers or developers or SEOs or whatever, and then they wake up one day and go, "Oh my God, I've got an agency of 10 people. How did that happen?" And their role is therefore very, very different. All of a sudden, they're a managing director. And I talk to a lot of agency owners at that point in their evolution and challenge them that they've got to make a decision. If they want to carry on being the practitioner, the creative director, or whatever it may be, do that. But if you want to grow your business, you are either going to have to move into that ND role kind of full time and learn how to do that and learn how to be, if you can, entrepreneurial and all the skills that go with that, or you're going to have to bring somebody else to run the agency because you still want to carry on doing the practitioner part. And there probably gets a point in the evolution of the agency where they can't effectively do both and manage new business and do everything else. So I think we have to remember that that's the typical journey somebody goes on, and along that journey, it's very easy to become really lost and suddenly go, I'm not doing any of the things that I kind of thought I was doing earlier or I want to do. So I think you're absolutely right, Chloe, leaning back into actually a bit of a reset about what it is that you do, what you enjoy doing, and then to your point, Dan, bringing in and putting the structure around it to make sure that you can be doing the things you genuinely enjoy and not all the other stuff that you probably don't, but comes with running an agency.
I had a really great conversation with somebody recently, and I won't give too much away because they're on the podcast, so they'll be released soon. But we talked about, and I think this is a really interesting question to ask yourself, is what does success mean to me? Because sometimes I think success can come across as, the collective, oh, well, like you said, Paul, I want to be driving a Ferrari and I want to be flying on a private jet. And that's fine if that's what success looks like for you. I know it doesn't now, Paul, but for anyone who's listening, if that's what it looks like for you and that's what you're striving for, that's great. But sometimes we can really forget what success means. And it can come down to really simple things like having financial freedom or having freedom in the day, being able to go out for a walk, in the afternoon on a hot day rather than have to be tied to your desk. Little things like that can also be great measures of success as well.
Massively important, Chloe. There's a lady I used to work with, used to have a really high-powered job, and then decided to start an agency. And the reason she wanted to start the agency was to have a much better work-life balance and spend more time with her husband and with her kids. So she starts the agency, and as time goes on, employs more people, bigger clients, undertook speaking engagements and was doing speaking engagements around the world, ultimately spending less time at home. Now, the numbers looked really good. If we're looking at like the revenue growth, profitability, those numbers are going up and up and up and up. But I challenged her one year and I was like, look, the numbers are looking good. But when we started working together, actually, personal success was to make sure your work-life balance was the way you wanted it and you spend as much time as possible with your family, with your kids. And that just kind of checked it because it was like, oh, yeah, like that was the reason I started it. And if I carry on with this trajectory, I'll get to where I was before, where there was very, very little of that. So thinking about what personal success looks like, and then revisiting it as well, and making sure that you're consistent with that is super important.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing that, Dan. One of the reports that we released in 2024 was about building a valuable agency, and we've done a couple of webinars and released a little bit of content around what exiting looks like. And the thing that really struck me was that for an agency to be considered kind of valuable for selling was not to have a boom bust model, right? We want to see a trajectory of growth. And I couldn't help but sort of think, well, since COVID, it has really been up and down, hasn't it? And I think that's COVID's always a milestone, isn't it, to kind of measure by. I don't know whether I could be wrong, but I don't know whether it's feasible to expect people to have had a constant growth trajectory since COVID to now. And I wonder if we have any advice for people who might not have been experiencing that year on year growth, but would still potentially be looking to exit their agency in the next sort of 5 years or so. I'm going to come to you, Paul, because you sat forward and looked quite eager. So I'm just going to ask you first.
I think in an earlier conversation, Ben picked up on this point of consistency, and I think what it comes down to is some of the points that Ben made about if you're doing the right things, keep doing the right things. So the actual advice I have for you is going to speak to Dan, because actually I think Dan would help you with your plan and look at your exit and speak to Dan at the earliest available opportunity. The consistency is just taking a longer term view, and it might mean to maximize the value. If it's all about the exit, it might mean pushing that exit date back, or consider pushing that exit date back a couple of years. But it's just about consistency. If you're doing the right things, just keep doing the right things. Conversely, if you're not doing the right things, maybe look at where you're not doing the right things. Look at some of the things that we've talked about around niching. Like, do you know what are the opportunity? What could you do? I think sometimes there's a risk that you're like, oh, it's been a tough year. Everyone says it's a tough year. Oh, unlucky. Let's go again next year. Whereas actually, sometimes there's an opportunity there to reposition as well. Maybe in a time of difficulty, your clients are less interested in these types of services, but actually you position it another way, and it's suddenly more valuable. So I think kind of giving you three answers there. Number one, go and talk to Dan. He's undoubtedly your man. Number two, just consistency. If you're doing the right things, keep doing it. But number three, if you're kind of obvious, I guess, if you're not doing the right things, but also like I don't think you should sort of like zigzag or flip flop, but be willing to, like, brave enough, humble enough maybe to like reposition and just think, oh, is this an opportunity to go even deeper with my niching, be even more specialist, go up the food chain? So maybe some of my current prospects think that I'm too expensive, but what if you went up a bracket and you could be you're competing for sort of like the next the next level up, and all of a sudden you're not the most expensive in one bracket, but you could be sort of like a lot more attractive in a higher bracket perhaps. So there's opportunities.
And that's a fantastic point, Paul. And I've had a couple of conversations with business owners recently, in fact, where they've said just that, in terms of going up to that next bracket, whereby all of a sudden we're no longer competing on price. We're only competing on quality with people that have comparable prices. And in that environment, I back myself in terms of the quality that my agency delivers. So just going up that bracket can be really, really powerful. I think that's an amazing shout, and some really good points there. I think one thing that Paul mentioned very briefly, but I think is super important, is having a plan, and planning for profit. Too many people they've done X revenue last year, and it's like, okay, last year's revenue plus X, with no real kind of thought on that side of things, and then just hoping for profit to come out the other end. But actually planning for profit, what profit do you want to make, and kind of reverse engineering from there to then work back to see what revenue would be kind of required to hit that. And in terms of that plan, have that plan clearly communicated with the team, have the team be involved and help with that plan, so everyone's invested. and all teams and all employees know exactly what they and their teams can do to contribute to that plan. So you're all rowing in the same direction as well. So that kind of planning piece, really, really important. And don't forget, like, we're a people business, so we need great people. So leaders to be focusing on their people, making sure that they're in an environment where they can do the best work of their lives. And then provided they've got that environment, they can do great work for the clients. So making sure that that foundation is there. And just one thing to be careful of, something that do see from time to time, and look, don't want to dampen optimism and things like that with agency owners, but sometimes people recruit aggressively ahead of the curve. So they're expecting a big year ahead. Recruitment goes into overdrive. Everyone's really, really happy, and that's all well and good if the resulting growth does materialize. But occasionally that doesn't, and invariably in that situation with the increased headcount, you're then really, really suffering from depressed profits and that feeds into the kind of boom bust cycle.
That's some great advice there, guys. Thank you. Any closing thoughts on 2024 before we move on to 2025?
I think the only one from me, in terms of conversations that I've had where business owners seem a little kind of unsure, is around the kind of new kind of working models, working dynamics since the pandemic. So obviously we all know what's happened in terms of everyone was in offices. Now a lot of people have got hybrid working environments, a lot more working from home on that side of things. A lot of conversation this year with business leaders and agency leaders is around, with this current model, are we able to be as creative, as collaborative, as client centric as before? And there's a little bit of a conversation around that. And don't get me wrong, there's no conversation around we all need to be back in the office 5 days a week. But there are agency leaders thinking, do we need to increase it a day potentially? They're just having these conversations to ensure that they can make sure that what they're delivering to their clients is as good as it can be. So I think that's been I think a marked change in conversation during 2024.
So I guess that's collective as well, isn't it? Because I hear that across all different sectors, that actually people are sort of, or leaders are maybe wanting to see people back in the office a little bit more than what they are. What are our thoughts on it?
I think it's something that we're really grappling with. When I speak to kind of agency owners about what's going on at the moment, irrespective of our conversations around new business, this issue of, we're still working out how many days we have people in the office, how many days they can work from home. I still think there's a lot of debate around it. I still find it slightly depressing when I go and see a client and I walk into the office, and it's where I get my agency fix, right? Because otherwise I'm sat here on my own, 4 or 5 days a week. And it's sad when you walk in and there's just nobody there, apart from a smattering of people that buzz has gone. And I think that's a real shame. And I think agencies are predominantly creative businesses, and creativity, yes, it can be done online. Yes, you can use Miro boards and stuff like that, but it's never better than when you are in the same room together, the buzz of the office. And as I say, I find it a little bit depressing when you don't see that as often. And I think it is something that agencies are really grappling with. To Dan's point, I don't think we'll see the day when everybody is back in the office 5 days a week. I don't think that will happen. But I think agency owners would probably like to see their staff in the office more than they currently are. And I think that will be an interesting thing to watch in the report next year as to whether that balance is shifting back towards more time in the office or not. Personally, it's something I'd love to see more of, because I think it's a real shame when we are so disparate and working separately from home.
And your point there, Ben, about yourself kind of feeling depressed when you go into an agency studio and it's like not a lot of people around.
Where is everyone?
Agency owners are telling me that themselves. They're like, I've built this agency, you've got X amount of people, and I'm on a video call with you now, Dan, from my garden office with like no one around, like I get a buzz from being in and around people, having those conversations, collaborating, that creativity. So business owners are struggling with that as well in terms of their own feelings about working from home or being in an office where there's 2, 3, 4 other people.
Yeah. I'm keen to come to you on this one as well, Paul. You're a business owner, a remote first business owner. What do you think about this?
So I strongly agree with Ben's point about creativity is better together. However, on the flip side, I see a lot of people struggling and they're like, well, it must be because no one's in the office. So I'm going to get everyone in the office. And I'm not sure that that's the answer either. Like let's face it, the genie's out of the bottle. It's going to be really hard there'll be some agencies that probably are 100% in person. I think it'd be really hard to mandate that. There's an expectation. Wow, we're able to recruit people who have been forced back into an office, and actually for us it works really well because it's massively expanded our recruitment pool, and people that want to work fully remote generally tend to have their can I swear they just tend to have their shit together like a lot more. They're like able to be organized, get their work done, and enjoy the benefits of it, right? So I think the answer is probably to like rethink it. Not is this hybrid, is this office or not? Because I think sometimes what you get is what Ben experienced with that hybrid model is a business has mandated that everyone has to be in the office 2 days a week, but then you just never have that density of everyone there at the same time. So something we do at WOW is we get everyone together from wherever they are in the world once a quarter. Now, could you do that monthly? Like possibly, and then focus all of the collaboration or the creative work you want to do on it's easier in principle, but on one day, or if you are going to be in the office, mandating that everyone's in the office one day, make it one day. So whether or not those ideas work, not those ideas work for everyone, but I do think that there's a reimagining that needs to take place to make this work.
That was a great closing point for 2024. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for sharing
No
that one.
worries.
Okay, let's move on to 2025. Let's think of some predictions, shall we? Who wants to kick us off? What are we? And you've got the freedom here to talk about any area, anything you want to talk about. What are we predicting for 2025?
I'm gonna say that I think these green shoots that Ben alluded to earlier on in terms of Q4 of 2024, which I think overall, I think I'm also feeling that. I think that 2025 is going to be bullish. I think that now that we're through all of this uncertainty and elections and X, Y, and Z, I think that your global brands are going to be more assertive in terms of their plans for the future and what they want to do. I think they're going to get back to longer term relationships with the agencies that they work with. I think that there'll be more certainty in terms of the projects that they want to undertake and move forward with. So I'm going to go with increased revenues, increased profitability. I think it's going to be a really positive year for agencies.
Ever the optimist. Okay, increased profitability, increased revenues. Anything else? Come on, Ben.
I think that will be the case for some, but to take a not the complete opposite view to Dan, I also think for many it's still going to be quite tough out there, if I'm being honest. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think the agency market is still hugely oversaturated. There are probably just too many agencies, and I think for a long time the market could kind of sustain that. For many years we've been riding this kind of digital wave, right? And there's been a huge amount of demand for agency offerings, agency services, and so on. But I think we've got to a point now where there are probably too many agencies, and I don't think, in fact I know, because it's just the reality of how these things work, that a lot of agencies are not going to survive the next few years, and I don't want that to be in any way depressing. What I do think it should be is kind of a bit of a call to arms around you've got to sharpen your pencil in 2025 and beyond. You've really, really got to start getting serious about some of the things that we've mentioned already on this on this podcast around really understanding what positioning means, learning what strategy means, really start to define what you do, who you do it for, how you do it, owning that niche. And all of these things are really easy for me to say, I know that, and they take time to actually think about and implement. But if you want to generate higher revenues, and especially to Dan's point, if you want to generate higher profits, because fundamentally that's what we're in the business of doing, right? We're here to make profit. Revenue is no good unless there are decent profit margins in there. And the one thing that was quite actually alarming from last year's BenchPress report was the deterioration in profit margins across the board, down to, I think, an average of 16, 70%, when it's said that sort of 20% is kind of the net profit margin kind of benchmark. I mean, ideally you're doing more than that, but they're going in the wrong direction. And I do think that is because there are too many agencies, again, going back to my point earlier, doing too many things for too many different types of client. And, you're not going to make the profit because it's a race to the bottom, right? There's always somebody around the corner that can do it cheaper. So I think it's a year of, yes, to Dan's point, let's not be too pessimistic. Agencies will grow, but certain agencies won't. And I think those are the ones that really need to take a look at what they're doing and who they're doing it for, and thinking about their strategy moving forward if they want to not just survive, but thrive beyond 2025. And we haven't even mentioned AI yet.
It's an interesting point, Ben, and what you say about feeling that the market's just oversaturated. Because one of the other predictions I have for 2025 is that I think there might potentially be an increase in M&A activity. And part of my reasoning for that is since the pandemic, it's been a really, really difficult trading environment for all businesses. To be honest, you've had the pandemic, got the cost of living crisis, increase in interest rates, war in Ukraine, just so many things, one thing after another, And the reality is, there are some business owners that are tired now. They're tired of the battle, and I think a combination of that in an oversaturated market. You've obviously got the bullish agencies who are gunning for growth. So I think there'll be opportunities for those agencies who are still growing to then purchase some of these agencies. So I think that like M&A activity might be something that increases next year, which leads to good outcomes for all. So the agencies who have had enough, they get an exit event. Their teams get to join a growing agency who's going places as well. And then they then have new capabilities, new resource to continue to grow. So I think that might be one of the things for 2025 as well.
Yeah, interesting. Paul, have you got any predictions for 2025?
No, I think like Ben said, I think we'd be daft to imagine that everything's all of a sudden, like the calendar year's ticked over and all of a sudden everything's going to be great. I think there's still a bit of shaking out to do that could take it a good chunk of the year. However, like I think Dan's bang on. There's opportunities out there, and I think maybe cautious optimism might be a decent mindset for this year as well. And I know we're going to come onto it, but I think it's massively overhyped. But I think 2025 could really be the point that we see people incorporating AI into their business models. It's not just something that you see in a PowerPoint presentation. It's not something that people talk about or interesting people on podcasts talk about, but that actually it's like it becomes like a day-to-day reality. You remember, or some people might remember, when everyone was talking about the internet this, the internet's going to change everything. And it felt like in reality, it probably took at least 5 years from like the hype to actually, oh my God, this is actually embedded into how we work, how we like how we buy things. Anyone just think about how like sounds obvious, but think about how the internet over a period of sort of like 4 or 5 years transformed how we buy stuff, how we listen to music, how we consume TV, right? And I think I'm not really being too brave to suggest that over the next 4 or 5 years we're going to experience the same with AI, but actually we've had the hype and now it's the practical manifestation in our day-to-day reality, and the opportunity for businesses, opportunity for agencies is like phenomenal. Certainly, like some of the things we talked about, like especially like profitability, um, actually creating much more profitable, much more resilient business models without any wizardry, but just using technology that is already there and is already developed and already available for everyone to use.
Yeah, great point. And we're already there, so let's carry on with AI, shall we? What I mean, do we still? I got the sense that maybe at the beginning of this year that AI was something that people were a bit, cautious, fearful of. How is it going to fit in? Is it going to take away people's jobs? That kind of thing. How is it going to do what we need it to do? Are we still feeling that, or are we sensing a bit more, a bit more welcoming for AI?
I think a lot of the claims made, when it all blew up, when was it, 12, 18 months ago? I can't remember. If you were, reading or listening to anything, the world was going to end within the year. We were going to have robots, AI robots roaming the streets and mowing us all down. And I did actually listen to a podcast that did make a prediction on those kind of lines. So I think a lot of the predictions were massively kind of exaggerated. I will be honest, I'm a bit of an AI skeptic, partly because of that, because I do think a lot of the benefits um, have been somewhat exaggerated. But I also think if you do reading around what's happening with likes of OpenAI and the issues they're facing around scalability, around how much money and cash they're burning every single day, and how much longer investors are going to sustain that, there is a potential bubble that's going to burst big time within the next 12 months. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think that could potentially happen. I think the other reason why I'm a bit of a skeptic is because as I look around these different tools and so on, um, I don't get a lot of the user cases around AI and a lot of the reasons why you would use it for a particular thing. So why would I, for example, want to create an AI version of myself? One Ben Potter is quite enough for the world. Nobody needs another Ben Potter AI because actually commercially, when you think about it, if I create this AI version myself and I feed it all of my content and so on, one, commercially, that doesn't make sense to me. Why would I want to, sell at potentially a lower price an AI version that can answer all of your questions? That's one issue. The second one, it takes away the human element of doing business, right? If we're going to start farming everything through kind of AI bots and so on, we're already isolated at home, working on our own a lot of the time. Why would I want to take away, as I say, that kind of human element of me talking to a client, asking them questions, understand the nuances of the problem they're facing, and then hopefully providing some sound advice on how they can kind of address that issue. So there's just, I just feel like we're in this kind of wild west at the moment where everybody's building something using AI, and when you actually study the user cases or the potential benefits, you need to really question them before you kind of go all in on some of this stuff.
So I think the reality is, whatever the current use cases are, kind of with the technology, we're still so early. We're still so early. I think there are and there will be, I think, significant benefits for businesses. I think it genuinely will be a paradigm shift. I think the key thing, which Paul alluded to, is increasing efficiency, which then trickles down to the bottom line in terms of profitability. I think in terms of automation of back office systems, I think things like that, there is so much that can be done. And even with our people and factoring it into our people experience, can you imagine a world where AI just completely takes care of all of the mundane tasks that people have to do in their jobs day in, day out, and that their only focus is then on creativity and the fun parts of their role, and to Ben's point, the human part of the role as well, our people will be so much more kind of empowered and enthused in their roles. So I think that from a people experience perspective, I think it can actually be like fantastic, and actually a bit of a kind of core competency of businesses and how they differentiate themselves. Because if they've got teams who are in an environment where all of the boring stuff's taken care of with AI, I only focus on the interesting stuff. Why would I then go and think about joining another business that doesn't have this infrastructure in place, and where I'll have to go back to doing all of those boring things? The likelihood is I'm not. So actually, from a retention piece, I think it can be really, really, really powerful. And then in the longer term, look, I'm not sure how agencies or businesses incorporate it to improve their products and services on that side of things. I think there is scope for that as well in the longer term. But in the nearer term, I see kind of the back office operations making people's lives easier. I see that as the big gain for businesses. One thing I will say, I'm lucky enough to talk to someone who's quite prominent in the field, an agency that I work with, and what they're saying is that a lot of the hesitation is around people just not knowing where to start. Like, they just don't know that obviously there's so much out there. To Ben's point, there's so many kind of new applications and new platforms being built. It's just like, where do I start? And I think a lot of the hesitation, from what they're saying, which makes sense, is around that. And the important piece that they said to me was, focus on, first and foremost, what is your strategy as a business? Where are you going? Where do you want to go? What are you trying to achieve? And then look at what AI can do to make you get there quicker and do it more effectively, and plug into that overarching strategy.
Mm, work with it for sure. So I'm kind of sensing from everything everyone said that actually the impact of AI directly in 2025, it doesn't feel like there's going to be the most massive impact. It feels like it's just steadily growing, and we'll maybe see these big changes in a couple of years, a few years time. Is that what have I sensed that right? Is that what we're kind of thinking?
Yeah, I was only going to reinforce your point, Dan, which is, imagine if you're looking to hire next year, and Dan's point was around back office systems. Imagine if instead of hiring someone next year, you ran a little experiment and you replaced a bunch of processes with technology. I think whilst the impact itself might not, we might not be sat here in 12 months' time saying, "Wow, what an epic impact!" But I think that, like, the foundations, the seeds could be planted for something quite big this year. Sorry, Dan, you go.
No, that's exactly where I think we'll land for 2025. So I think from talking with business owners, 2024 was a bit like, a few of us have got ChatGPT in a tab on our second screen that we go into here and there, might use it for a bit of marketing copy, that kind of thing. I think 2025 is an acceleration of experimentation, where we've got proper kind of focus groups within businesses who are actually undertaking specific experiments to see where they can find those efficiencies and what AI can potentially do. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be revolutionary. I don't think we're going to see significant improvements in operating profit because we've improved efficiency so much. But I think there'll be an acceleration of experimentation. And then in the years to come, I think that there will be significant benefits from an operating profit perspective, and also give agencies the ability to scale more efficiently. So the standard model of more bums on seats as we scale, and that ongoing struggle with profitability as we scale, I think that will be able to be cracked, whereby we don't need to scale with as many bums on seats, because we've got AI taking care of a lot of the kind of operational mundane stuff within agencies.
Interesting. So we'll see where we're at at the end of 2025 if the robots have come and overtaken everything and we were all proven completely wrong.
Well, that's what Ben's scared of. So
Yeah.
we never know, getting run over by the AI.
I'm not actually, because I hopefully, and hopefully this is the case. I don't think that is going to happen. I agree with you guys. I think 2025 will be about kind of incremental improvements as people become familiar with the right tools, how to use them. I think predominantly it's an efficiency play to your point, Dan. So I think anything we see next year is going to be about more kind of incremental growth and the use of AI than anything completely revolutionary and potentially frightening. But let's wait and see where we get to over the coming weeks and months.
So just diverting off a little bit, we've already talked a little bit about new business for 2024. And I guess the two biggest blockers for new business was delayed decisions and cuts to budgets. And Ben, I'm going to come straight to you with this one, but I'm intrigued to know if we think that's going to be a similar situation for 2025 and what on earth we do to overcome it, really. Another big question for you, but have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I think a lot of the dither and delay that you refer to there in 2024 was driven by world events, were driven by things outside of our direct control. To Dan's point, there was an election every other week somewhere in the world. A lot of those have passed now, so in some ways, on a sort of macro level, hopefully there's a bit more certainty moving forward. But then, if you think about the flip side of that coin, we may have had an election in the US, but it's brought us a certain Mr. Trump. So God knows what's going to happen over the next kind of 12 months where the US and their policies are concerned. We've got a huge amount of turmoil and unrest in the Middle East. We've still got the issue with Russia and Ukraine, and I could go on. So whilst we've got a lot of elections out of the way, there's still a lot of unknowns with regards to what's going on in the world. And I know, you could pick any year in history and say there was a lot of stuff going on. But I do think a lot of the, particularly for larger agencies, network agencies, global agencies, perhaps a lot of that dither and delay came through that uncertainty. What can we do about that? I think it goes back to quite a few of the things we've spoken about already. I think tightening up the positioning, making yourself really attractive to a kind of a discrete audience, so that you are attracting the right sorts of prospects through the door in the first place. I think you've got to be really good at doubling down on your qualifying efforts to really understand that if you are being approached by somebody, or in particular, if you're approaching somebody from a cold perspective, that they are at that kind of metaphorical start line. So in other words, they want to work with you. They want to address a particular problem that they've identified, that they want to address that problem in the very near future, that this is something that is a priority and they want to look at sooner rather than later, amongst other things, budgets, of course, stakeholders. There's a lot wrapped up in that kind of qualifying piece. But I think being willing to ask the difficult questions early in the sales process is a really, really critical skill that a lot of people need to learn, and not being afraid to broach some of those subjects rather than just sort of putting together a proposal and hoping that they've got the budget when you fire it over and then wondering why they disappear and never speak to you again. So I think the qualifying part is really, really critical. There's a really good book that I've just literally finished reading called The Jolt Effect, and it's been around for a little while. It's by the same guys that wrote The Challenger Sale, and it's all about indecision. It's all about why do clients have an inability to make decisions, and there are some fascinating insights in there about why that happens and how you can overcome that indecision. So if you don't do anything else, maybe start by reading The Jolt Effect, and that will give you some really good insight on how you can overcome some of that indecision from buyers.
What's your top tip from that book, Ben?
Oh, good one. Do you know what? I haven't downloaded yet some of the assets from the website which talk about specific questions you can pose and how you can go about uncovering indecision. But I think the interesting thing from the book was the distinction between maintaining the status quo, and that used to be the immediate barrier you have to get over with a buyer, because often people default to the status quo, and you see this all the time, right? So in a competitive pitch situation, the end result will be, despite the fact you've gone through the whole process, pitched, etc., that the client, lo and behold, ends up staying with the incumbent agency, even though throughout the process they were telling you how crap they were. And that is a result of that kind of bias towards the status quo, because it's easier to kind of stick with what you know than take the risk of a decision which may involve or will involve a new strategy working with a new agency. But they made the point that there's a real clear distinction between maintaining the status quo and the inability to make a decision. And that was really quite surprising to me, that actually those things are very different. In sales training, you're always taught about how to identify that kind of status quo bias and how you overcome it. Indecision is a very different thing. And I think that's what the book really hones in on, is that understanding of why people can't make decisions, and then for how you overcome it. So I think that was the big takeaway for me, that those two things are very different. But I've now got to, as I tend to do with these books, is work out how I start to build it into my sales training. So hold that thought down. Come back to me in about 3 months' time.
I look forward to it. Look forward to it, Ben. Look.
In the meantime, if anybody's, well, hopefully people are listening to this, just go and buy the book and read it. It's a really interesting study. They basically, using AI, studied millions and millions and millions of sales phone calls, and that's how they went about conducting the study, to understand what indecision looked like and then how to overcome it. So it's a really interesting read if you're a bit of a sales geek like me.
Sounds interesting. Sounds really interesting. I think, to build on what Ben said, I think a lot of what we've talked about already in terms of that consistency of effort, making sure that we're focused on, our leading sales indicators, and we're doing whatever that activity is week in, week out, and we've got that kind of patience as well in terms of marketing strategies, new business strategies. I think it's important, but I think referrals are always one of the key sources of new business. Every BenchPress survey pretty much says this. And I think relationships are so important. We've come off the back of a very difficult 2024, where unfortunately there are lots of people that have lost jobs. Because lots of people have lost jobs, that's resulted in agencies losing work because they've got key contacts in who have lost jobs in some of these brands. So I think there's two things: keeping a close relationship and keeping tabs on these key contacts, because you don't know what's going to happen in the future in terms of where they will get a job in the future, and where they will then be looking to obviously start the job strong, and by doing that they can refer in quality agencies that they've worked with in the past. But also, an underrated tactic is forming relationships with rising stars at these at the companies that you work with. These rising stars who may not be decision makers now, but as their career develops and they move from brand to brand, they then bring you in when they are a decision maker. And it can be more of a longer term thing. I'm not saying that that's going to be fruitful in 2025, but at some point, if you're doing that consistently and maintaining those relationships over time, good things will come from it.
One of our questions that is on the BenchPress survey is, what did you do in the last 12 months that made the biggest positive difference to your performance? I feel like we should come straight to the positive king over here, Dan, and ask you what sort of answers do you think we're going to see to that question?
Everything's going to be amazing. No. I think off the back of what business leaders are telling me about recruitment and the quality of talent that's been on the market, and the way they've been able to bolster their teams, and really happy about how senior people have been able to come in and unlock the power of internal teams. I think that recruitment of a key team member, I think maybe one of those, someone senior, maybe an account director, a team lead, something like that. I think recruitment of a key team member might be up there.
I wonder whether people might say, going back to our earlier point, that they got people together more often. They got their teams in the same room working together. I think it'd be interesting to see if there's anything in that this year that is different from the previous report, that talks about frequency in office, or to Paul's point earlier on, even if it's just a monthly, strategy day and sort of, social afterwards. We were massively limited for a couple of years around our ability to be together in the same space. I really hope that we see in this report that people have made a conscious effort to get their people together more often, both from a creative point of view, but also kind of socially as well.
Dan made a really good point earlier about, that in good times, there's this tendency to kind of like hire way in advance, way ahead of the curve. And I think maybe there could have been some opportunities for people that have been a bit more circumspect. No doubt beyond the people stuff, there'll be, I bet there's some interesting stories about client wins. In spite of everything, in spite of all the talk, we managed to land this client because X happened and this happened. That hopefully there's a bunch of stuff like that that we can share through BenchPress and give inspiration for other people building, because there's so much good stuff out there, but we do when there's all the noise about how tough it is. And I'm not saying it's just noise, because there's a reality about how tough it is. You can lose sight sometimes of the positives. So thankfully we've asked this question, and thankfully we have Dan as our ray of sunshine, our shining light beam of positivity.
I think just building on Paul's point, I think, I know what the answer should be to this question, and it should be something along the lines of we finally fixed our new business problem. And I think it's been really interesting to see. I hope the same question is asked this year that has been asked in previous years, where it's along the lines of, what were your top 3 challenges? And every single year, new business comes out number 1 or number 2. I think last year, it might have been recruitment. I think previous years, as I say, new business has always been right up there. I'd love to see that, ironically, slip down the rankings. I'd love to see more agencies having found a way of fixing that problem, and therefore generating a more consistent level of new inquiries and new business coming through the front door. But importantly, the right business, the right clients that fit the ideal client profile of that agency, that marry up to the positioning. I'd love to see that. Without being Mr. Skeptic again, I'm not necessarily expecting to see that. But at the same time, I would love to see some improvement in that stat.
So unfortunately, Ben, new business was actually number 1 last year with 40%.
It was, yeah.
It was
last
number
year.
1
I
with
would say the year before.
40%. So, and I think it was a big increase on the year before as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Is new business or recruitment like ever truly fixed? When you get to the top of the mountain, there's another mountain. When you're flying with new business, you think, oh, well, this is working well. I want more. So still, like, new business is the bigger challenge.
yeah.
I've never met anyone that said, oh, we have nailed recruitment and retention. We're the absolute gods. Like, no one's nailed it, have they? So probably
No.
they're like evergreen challenges that any growing business will always have. Yeah, indeed.
Will always be in the top 3.
That's our safest prediction, and you watch now. You watch.
Will AI be number 1? It's like
Yeah, can you
top of the
imagine?
pops, isn't it?
One other thing we might see. So, obviously, we know the last 18 months, 2 years, new business has been an issue, and it may have meant that some agencies have therefore looked at their service offerings, products that they sell, to see if that still aligns with their ideal client avatar, and there might have been kind of new products, new services developed, launched, and put out to market to kind of get out of the difficulties that agencies were having. So that might be one of the ones on there as well.
I usually finish every podcast with the question, what does beautiful business mean to you? But I wanted to just edit that, tweak it a little bit for you guys today. Since we're doing some predictions, what I'd love to ask is, what do we think beautiful business is going to look like for 2025? And what advice do we have for people who are striving to create that beautiful business? Paul, I'd love to come to you first, if that's okay.
What a good question. I think what advice? I think like the main advice kind of like coming out of the whole panel today is about consistency and keep on keeping on. I think keep doing the right things, keep fighting the good fight. I think we talked before about mindset and how energizing it is to connect with your core purpose. So as purpose-driven businesses, like what is that purpose for you? What like spend some time to like reconnect with that. And I think there's a like fire that comes and talk to people about it and recruit people into your cause. And I don't mean hire people. I mean within your organization, talk to people about that fire and get people fired up and talk about it.
Dan, Ben, what are you guys thinking about 2025 and beautiful business?
I think for me, building on what Paul said, it's alignment and having alignment all the way through a company in terms of real clarity on where we're going. What is it we want to achieve? What is it we want to be? Where is it we want to go? And having alignment all the way through the company in terms of every single person understanding and knowing what they can do to contribute to that journey and how they can kind of show up and help that cause. So I think that would be it for me. And just back to the AI point on if experimentation is done to enable teams to get rid of a lot more of the mundane stuff so that they can really enjoy their roles, be more creative in their roles. I think that's really cool too. And in terms of advice, I think it's just a matter of focusing on your people and having fun along the way.
I'd probably finish up with I suppose a call to arms and a little bit of repetition from kind of earlier points, but be really deliberate in your business strategy. There's no room for, somebody used this term a while ago and I had to go and look up what it meant, but I love it. There's no room for kind of boiling the ocean anymore. And I had to go look up what that meant. And it effectively meant, we try loads of different stuff and we hope some of it kind of sticks. I think being deliberate in your strategy is about defining exactly what you do, where you bring the most value, who you do it for, your methodologies and your thinking, how you do it. And full service for ambitious brands doesn't count as a strategy. We need to be a lot more refined in how we define what we do and who we do it for. Somebody far brighter than me a while ago, quite a few years ago now, said that strategy is about sacrifice. It's not just about choosing the things that we do. It's also about eliminating the things in our heart of hearts we know we shouldn't be doing and that we're not good at. And I think it's time for all agencies to take a really close look at all the things they claim to do and be really honest about themselves, about the things that they both enjoy and the things that they are actually really good at, and get rid of everything else and be really laser focused moving forward. So I'd love to see more of that in 2025.
That's cool. I don't know if he still does it now, but Richard Branson used to, on an annual basis with his leadership team, they used to basically start with a list of 10 priorities going into the next year. And the purpose of the meeting was effectively to scratch 7 off to then just get to your top 3 and really kind of laser focus on that. So, yeah. Completely resonate with that, Ben.
Guys, I've really loved chatting with you today, and regardless of whether the predictions are correct or not, we'll soon see. I think we've had a really interesting chat. I've really enjoyed listening to our thoughts and feelings about 2024 and what we think is going to come in 2025. So thank you so much for joining me today. It has been a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah,
Really
thanks,
enjoyed it, Chloe. Thanks a lot for hosting.
Thank you for listening to the Beautiful Business Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please remember to subscribe and leave us a review. For more advice and practical tips on what it's really like to build a beautiful business, visit our content hub at wowco.uk/hub or check out the link in the show notes.